Hello, everybody, all over the world, and welcome to HiPod number 9. Special guest, Sigafoo. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Is this number 9 this season? Because we did one. We were talking about this. You mentioned we did one 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was number 4. So here's the thing about this podcast. I only do it when there's something I want to talk to somebody about something. Which means I've been pretty much sticking to myself. Like the last podcast I did was with Miss Moth, and we talked about feelings, I think. So this is probably going to be a bit more interesting because we talk about stuff that matters. And you, sir, have a medal that just says pro. I mean, what happened, dude? Like, what's been happening in the years since we last talked? Because maybe not all of my viewers know who you are. Because I got some new ones.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with me, I'm most well known for about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit, maybe 6 years ago, I created the technique that ultimately got coined, not by me, but others, as the Sigafoo save, which is the use of the Rescue Ranger and the gun. I created a very popular frag video called From NG with Love, which I put a lot of work into, as a lot of people enjoyed. And then from there, I did pretty well in my Highlander career as an engineer back in the day. And since then, that's all the backstory of like who I am as a player. And now I've taken less of a player role, and I started. So about 2 years ago, I went to Valve for the first time, and I had a big long chat with them about all these different things. Which, if you're interested, you can go search my YouTube channel, and I have like a 3-hour long video where I talk about all the things I talked about them with, and all the different ideas. Some of the stuff is balanced, and it was even some of the stuff that I talked about Valve was stuff that me and you talked about on that original podcast.
Yeah, because it was called like balance and stuff, and it's a nice little time capsule too, like what was going on at that time as well.
Absolutely, and it is interesting. I mean, I think most of the things I didn't change a lot of the stuff because it's like, usually I kind of think pretty critically about those things. I don't make balance suggestions lightly, or at least I'll be like, something needs a change, but I don't know what it is, But anyways, and so then so I visited them, and then after that I did a challenge cup, as I called it. That was, and then that was where it was only going to be a 6v6 with one less scout and payload included, and people were like, we don't want that. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go do something completely different because I believe in it. And so I created a Prolander, which is a 7v7 format with one of each class. Yeah. It's fluid, dynamic, fast-paced. It's good.
Yeah, we had a team and played in it, actually, and it was a lot of fun because I got to tell you, man, I used, like you back in the day, I used to have a sniper career as a sniper. However, I would never find like a team that was willing to practice as much as I did, and after a while of just like team hopping and never really finding like really good teammates that was like, oh man, these are my friends, these are cool guys, I just kind of like, man, this isn't fun for me. Why am I wasting my time doing stuff that I don't find fun? So I just stopped and focused more on my YouTube stuff. So
which is,
I guess we can both be like competitive veterans.
Yes.
I would say. So we're like the old guys that are now going more into management.
It pretty much it. I mean, well, it's like after I kind of visited Valve, like, I've kind of always had this, kind of thing in the back of my mind. I think both of us, where we just saw things wrong with the TF2, either the game or the community or the formats and stuff like that. And I am always one not afraid to take a chance and push something forward, even if it's like not popular with the majority, because I think it's right,
Well,
and if you're right, it'll be proven true ultimately, which has been the case so far with most things that I've done.
Yeah. I remember like the first big thing that I did or campaigned for was the crouch jump cancel out of scope that snipers were able to do, which basically prevented punish from other snipers. Like if I was a sniper and I shot first, I could just jump out of scope and crouch jump, and the other sniper couldn't reliably headshot me. And they got patched into the game, and like sniper duels were a bit more, sniper duels are still pretty weird because sniper support and stuff like that, but ultimately, it made it less cheap to play against, and I got so much shit for that because Sniper said I had ruined the game forever.
Yes.
And that's
that's why I got the same thing. I mean, we were talking about this in the free rant game. It's like there's a lot of spies who hate me because I was, when I went to Valve, I pushed very hard for the Deadringer and Ambassador to get changed because, as I said, like, and you even said in your videos, I love so much because I wish I could do a 30-minute video, but I'm already hated enough, about many parts of the community that I try not to spur more hatred. But you know what? Spy is not a sniper. Like Spy should not have a long range, high damage weapon. They are a close range, high damage, instant kill class, and they should remain that way. And there should be a very high risk reward with their lives, not a low risk, high reward with the Dead Ringer that was happening.
I probably had a couple of years ago, I was at Deutschland where I played a LAN against one of the best teams in the EU, CJ's team. The name escapes me because I'm really bad with remembering team names. And they had Toast, which was arguably the best ambassador spy in all of Europe, maybe even the world, because that was all he did. And he was using, of course, the Dead Ringer and the ambassador, and I couldn't kill him, and if he saw me, I was dead because he was so good and so fast. Like, I couldn't do anything. And once I did hit him, it was always a Dead Ringer, and he got away, and it was like super frustrating. So I got to feel like the high-end spectrum of what it feels like. It's basically like a bully that never stops bullying you ever.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's only, and that was the thing, is like this was not an issue. It's like many of the problems with stuff in the game, it's like they need to be patched because the high level players, not the low level players. Like there's stuff that needs to be patched from the low level players, like like Flog and stuff like that back in the day, But it's like one of these things where people just don't understand, like, just because you're not good enough to abuse this at a level which is abusive doesn't mean it's not a problem. It just means you're not good enough to make it a problem, to understand why it's that way. And it's funny because that story, I have a very specific memory of you messaging me after the tournament being like, oh my god, Sigafoo, you're so right, or something along those lines of like, you kind of believed in what I said, but you never actually went up against it, and then you finally did, and you're like, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from now. Like,
I think I remember that, because I was like, in the beginning you were like, Ambassador is so good, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I haven't really experienced it, maybe, and then like after I come, I was like, oh yes, absolutely, that asshole destroyed me effortlessly, like with that, and I felt helpless, and yeah, so you were right about that. Like usually the good balance decisions aren't fun ones,
right?
Because I've seen some game developers talk about balance and how balance is boring. People like upsets, and that's like why I think random crits are still in the game, because always when you look at like no crit servers back in the days before casual and Valve servers, random crit servers would always be more populated than no random crit servers for some reason. Like people just chose that back in the day, and I think it's like creating upsets and like the fun part, it's like not balanced, but people play it anyway. Like what do you think people play Mario Party or like some other stupid random game?
Well, it's like bad game design in like Overwatch, where they make it really easy for teams who are playing poorly to come back in games because of fast respawns and being able to maintain your what's it called, your ultimates and stuff percentage. You don't lose it on death, so there's no downside, and that creates like this, oh my god, what a crazy comeback we had where we just kept responding to defend the point when really we should have lost it 5 minutes ago because we got punished consistently. But we don't know what game design is, #Blizzard.
Well, I'm not sure if you know, but I put Blizzard's game design in TF2 with the Overwatch mod, and it sucked so much. I copied the classes the best as I could, used the same respawn things, the same damage values, and it was just, I mean, it was fun, but it was so bad. There was also a plugin someone made, so you got ultimates and abilities as well. Like Scout got the Tracer recall, but it was super buggy, so sometimes we just trigger no clip, and then you could no clip as a Scout around. That was fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. So we're on the same page. So yeah, that's what we talked about last time. Balance stuff. We might talk more about that later too. But you have, in the meantime, gone and created something all of your own, which is the reason I wanted you to be on here. So to prelude this, I think like both, like for competitive play, if you observe other successful games, like not just PC games, but like any kind of mobile game or whatever game you will have, the way you play competitive is indistinguishable from the way you play casual. Like StarCraft 1v1 is the same if you play on ladder or you play competitive. Like it is, like the casual and the ladder is the same game mode. It's just that you have points in one and not in the other, and just by spectating you can't really tell. And that's really the gist of it. And TF2 has always had this huge rift between what the casual players play and what the competitive players play in terms of what maps they play, what things are available, what they're allowed to do and not do. Like in pubs, you can do whatever you want. There's nothing stopping you. But suddenly, if there's a second medic in an official Sixes map, you get disqualified or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. No, and it's very true. And there's been this disconnect, and I think that and also there's been a staleness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been no at all changes to either format in any significant way for 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's like there's not growth. Growth stopped about 5-6 years ago, probably longer than that. I have to go look up at the chart. But no one else was like, hey, maybe we can. The game has evolved since we created this format originally. Maybe we can do something differently to grab, because TF2 still has great numbers, but the competitive community is unable to reach those, and there's got to be a reason why.
Yeah, I mean, the competitive mode is available, and it's mainly the restrictions that's the biggest problem. I remember when I first got into competitive TF2, I was actually in Korea at the time. It was before, like a half a year before I started doing the show, which I also started doing down there. And it was like around the time the Engineer update came around, I think. That was 2011, something like that. I remember Gunslinger was like new to me. And I was like, oh man, finally a tool that I can use in Sixes to deal with the scouts. Awesome. And they were like, no, you cannot use that. It's banned. And I was like, oh. And that was when it was OP and broken. But still, I was like, oh man, that's a downer. I really like using that. So that was like a deterrence. So for me, like the main problem with the competitive formats that are popular today, mainly Highlander and Sixes, is that they both have and lack something of the other. Like Sixes has the downfall of the restrictive classes. It's like a meta. It's like Scout, Soldier, Demo, Medic. Sometimes you pick something else just to break a stalemate, but that's pretty much it. No really crazy unlocks. It's pretty much you know what to expect. Like crits is crazy, but Uber is like what you expect, and there's that. And but there's the what makes competitive games interesting, especially for me, like StarCraft, is the missing information aspect. And in Sixes, you don't know if they could suddenly be running a spy or a sniper that can catch you by surprise. So while Highlander has more players, which I am in favor of, like because TF2 casual is more players than Six, but the thing is, like, you always know that they're running a spy, and sometimes when teams are good, spies can't really do much except like give information, and that's all they do. They're kind of dead weight if they can't get the picks, if they are always called out and stuff. So while Sixes has the freedom of like surprise classes, Highlander does not, but Highlander provides more freedom in terms of what unlocks you're allowed to use. But you're very much restricted to the one of each class, and it really changes the dynamic in the game and makes my class so good. Like snipers, oh man, we make or break Highlander. Mostly break though, when the Razorback could have overhealed. So,
well, snipers break every format where you see any sort of actual class diversity, because sniper is the counter to a lot of the beefier classes and a lot of the slower class. Like sniper's a counter to anything which is not fast, basically.
Yeah, and it's also it's where the game has been out for so long that people have reached this skill level. Like the average skill level of like good snipers is way higher than before, so they're able to do way more than they used to. And that's when you're like, okay, we have to do something about this, because I'm used to, like we mentioned this before, like what if we could make so that snipers can't quickscope medics effortlessly anymore? And I'm like, oh, no, blasphemy! Don't do this! And instead, it's like, okay, but maybe that isn't fair. If I see you, you're dead if everybody does that. So TF2 has an economy of time spent in one place. And Engineer, if you want to insta-kill a medic with your sentry, you have to spend 20 to 30 seconds in a spot and build your gun to do that, while I just have to be there, right click, left click, and then I can go home and have a coffee because my job's done.
Yeah, I personally think that would be the biggest. Is like, I mean, even you could either do, well, we can get into balance changes, which I have, but the quick one for sniper is like, I think it's either one of two, where you either lower the base damage to 40 so you can't quick scope and you take a zoom up, or there's just like literally you cannot shoot until you reach a certain like half-second mark, and then the gun is allowed to go off at a full 150, and kind of go from there. Because I think that's the reason sniper's so powerful is his ability to be cognizant of everything going around him by not having to be zoomed in, and then he can instantly zoom in, instantly headshot where his crosshair is, and he can down a majority of the classes, or a good portion of the classes, or do 150, which is enough to stop somebody from doing anything that they want, pretty much.
And sniper is I would say, like, when I did my it was usually like a satirical video, but like top 9 TF2 classes. I just ranked all of the classes from best to worst, and I think I put sniper at the top and demo a second, because sniper, if you're godlike, you can kill anyone if you have proper positioning, because you can just out-position your weakness, and your superior aim just makes up for that, and they can't get you if you have a proper team that protects you, which, you know, in Highlander you do. So
yeah, it's definitely one of those things. But I mean, kind of back to the sixes thing now that we're doing this. So we did, so, you know, kind of like, you know, it's funny. So we talked about the Highlander, we talked about the sixes, and that's kind of where Prolander came in. Was like, there's always this conversation about, you know, can you have less players but still have all classes and still have a good format? Because forever, you know, this is the thing we'll kind of get into with the no restrictions as well. It's like everybody, particularly sixes players, who have no concept of how the game actually plays with all classes, because they do not play the game with all classes. They play in a very niche, hyper-specialized format.
Yeah.
They see heavies as like a problem, or snipers as a problem, when it's like one of these things where it's like, no, these things are problems if they don't have their counters. Like, that's when things are problems in the game, right?
Yeah.
And so Prolander came in and it was like, can we do this? And like everybody, I mean, you can go read the forums on TF2. I mean, hundreds of posts, literally hundreds of posts, where it's just everybody just talking about how terrible of an idea it is, how it'll never work, how it's this 8-year-old format that was tried 8 years ago, and therefore it could never possibly work. And heavy slow down the game, snipers slow down the game, and engineers slow down the game, and there's zero possibility of this thing being anything but useful. Okay. And guess what? They were all fucking wrong.
Yeah, let me tell you about something. I was at, I think a couple of years ago, I was at one of the I series in England. And I was there. I met up with some TF2 dudes. I watched competitive play, and it, like, the sixes, like, I tried to enjoy it. I tried to watch it, and it was just so boring to me. There was like no innovation. They were just doing safe things, like, hey, we get a pick, then we push. If we don't get a pick, we wait. And then, like you said, like, oh, the heavies slow down the game. And it's like, no, the players slow down the game. If you want to play it safe all the time and never take any risks because you only go off advantages, of course the game's going to be boring and stale, even with the faster classes. And that's the players. The players, the problem. It's how they play. That's right. Like...
Well, it's also the format to some degree as well, because the format is purposely not allowing you to play the classes in the game. And so because of that, you can't play the counters. So it's like, so for instance, like the thing that's really commonly used is like, well, heavies to mid is just so overpowered. We can't allow a Gru whipped heavy to mid. There's just no way to counter that. And then I'm just like, do you realize that heavies to mid is only an issue inside of sixes? Like, no one's ever like, oh my god, a heavy on, you know, mid and Highlander is just too powerful, or a heavy on mid and Prolander is just too powerful. Why? Because you can run a sniper, one, that instantly counters a heavy from getting any sort of forward ground, or two, you can run a spy to be able to backstab him as well at any position. So it's like one of these things where it's like, heavy's only an issue if you don't have the counters inside the game. And like, that's a common problem with all of sixes fundamentally. They're like, well, all these things are broken. I'm like, well, they're all broken because you don't have the things that allow them not to be broken. If I had a format which was all heavies, if I had a format which was all scouts, and then I like ran a fucking Natasha heavy, or I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, like, or I ran like a level 3 engineer, you'd be like, oh my god, engineer is the most overpowered class in the game because scouts literally can't get at the sentry gun, right? But it's like, no, if you had demo soldiers, spies, you know, there's all these different things that counter engineer. But if it was just a game of scouts and engineers, well, then engineer would look really overpowered. It's just your format. It's not the game. It's not the class.
That goes also to like how the game is designed and how players understand the design game. I remember seeing someone talk like about StarCraft again, because I think StarCraft is like a marvel or a gem when it comes to like balancing, especially like the first one, where you had stuff that was strong, but it was strong and fair. Like you could put like going up a ramp was pretty tough, and it was like, if I put 3 tanks on this top, you can't enter on this ramp. Like, it's impossible. Go do something else. And people were like fine with that, because that's like then an obstacle. So here in this case, in your example, the heavy is like this unovercomable obstacle of just instant death machine that just kills you, that you are unable to do anything with in the minds of many many narrow-minded Sixes players.
They're not narrow-minded. They're just ignorant. They generally choose to be that way.
Well, like Sixes is a format that they have figured out. Like, you have all the answers, and suddenly if someone breaks that format and goes outside the rules that you used to have, many players do not innovate on the spot and just figure out how to deal with it. So I can see how that's a problem. Also, when I've tried talking to like normal competitive players that just have an opinion on the game, and their understanding of balance is very much limited to their own experiences. Like, they don't they think in a very narrow mindset, which is hard to explain in words.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how else to put it.
I think that, but it's like the same thing that what happened with Sixes players when they're trying to describe Pro Landers. Like, they can only think about the game in terms of their own format because they don't play other formats to understand how the balance actually happens. And so, of course, it would make sense that they don't understand that heavies and snipers and engineers don't slow down the game. They only slow down the game if they don't have their counters, or if you're playing a stalemate map like 5CP, which Pro Lander doesn't. And so, to me, it's like one of these things where it's just like, you know, you just need to show people and get them to play outside of the thing. But the other thing, too, is that Sixes, you know, the thing I like to say is, like, you cannot evolve on Sixes. Like, you literally cannot make Sixes a better format than what it already is, except maybe if you ban more weapons, or you just ban classes.
It's played so much, and it's so refined, so people know exactly how to play it and how to deal with pretty much any scenario in it. But it's very restrictive to us casual plebs that's like, well, I like to play Sniper, but I can't because I get bombed every time, and then I switch, and it doesn't work. Anyway.
Well, that's my point, is that just to say is that it's that they have a format which is exactly what they want it to be, right? Mm-hmm. And so for you to try to force other classes into it is incorrect to them, because they literally, like, there's so many Sixes players who have had conversations with, they're like, I just don't want to play with the heavy. Like, they don't care about becoming a format which is inclusive. They just literally don't. They want to play the game exactly how they want to play it, and that's where also the problem kind of lies, is because it's like, that's totally fine, but you can't both be exclusive and then also want to be the largest format in TF2. Like, you can't do both.
You can't be like, we want to include everyone, but don't do anything that we don't like, that you always do all the time, Mr. Beggar's Bazooka Man.
It's like I created a whole format, and we never want to play with spies ever, right? And that's just the format. And we have like a decent following of players who just hate playing with spies, and that's, or there's a Demos Nights League, right? I think that's a really good example. So the Demo Nights League that just came out, and people, some people really, really love that, and that's really cool. But that's never going to be the most popular version of TF2, and people might be like, oh, well, it's the most, mechanically rich and dense version of TF, and you don't need all those, because those classes don't have the mechanical depth that Demo Nights do. And if you played this and you understood the beauty of the game and you loved DM and mechanical depth, then you would understand that this is the true version of TF2. But then you're like, dog, like, this does not play at all like TF2. Where are the classes? Where are the maps? And that's where my problem comes in. It's like, I think it's really cool that you have this format, that you love it, but you have to understand that, like, it's not a good face for competitive to some degree, because it's not like a way for people to get into competitive unless they really want to play DM only team-based gameplay. Yeah. But that doesn't seem to me to be like TF2. TF2's classes. TF2's combination in the restructuring of classes and pushes, and then also playing on, Payload and Koth and other popular map types. That, to me, seems more like TF2 than just raw DM. It's not that Sixes is a bad format. It's a fantastic format, and it is exactly what it wants to be. But the question is that the format we want to bring to a general audience of TF2? And they've spent $500,000 invested. Lands, international lands, popular people, every single thing possibly promoting it, but it doesn't grow. So the question is when do we call it enough? And we go like, okay, we need to pivot, because this isn't working. And that's kind of where No Restriction Sixes comes in a little bit.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add to that, like, they're like, when people watch, like, let's say they get introduced to, like, the grand final of some TF2 game, like from the iSeries or Replay LAN or Rewind or whatever it was called, and they watch that. I'm like, wow, oh, cool. I'm going to check out TF2 and see what, like, this fast-paced, team-based game is like. And then you go into a pub, and it's nothing like what you saw in the finals. Like, if you look at, like, like Overwatch, if you look at the finals there and then you go play the game yourself, it's you play it the exact same way. But here's like a huge disconnect. Like someone's like, "What is this bike class? He wasn't in the final that I saw. What's this pyro doing here? Like, he wasn't there. Why don't we have a medic? Where's the healer?" So
yeah, I think the comparison I like to make is because it's kind of like, TF2 is always going to be a little bit closer to CS:GO than like other games where like I think there's always going to be a casual setting which is different than what the actual competitive looks like. In casual CS:GO, it's like 12v12 or something like that, very similar to TF2, and like I don't think it's ever going to be that matchmaking is ever going to take over the casual market. Yeah. However, the difference is like if you created a format which took away the op, took away the AK, only allowed SMG, and then you only played hostage maps. Yeah. Like that's what Sixes is like. It's like, let's take one of the least popular map types, let's remove a lot of weapons in the game. We want to play the game in a very fast-paced way. We don't want instant kills. We want people running around everywhere, right, to be able to get kills and not die instantly. And that to us is like what the perfect play to win the game. It's like, well, that's a very big disconnect than what the casual community is like, and so that's kind of where I'm like, that's where no restriction Sixes comes in, because I'm trying to challenge everybody, including myself, about what we know about balance in TF2, because with Prolander, I was extremely confident. I knew exactly what the outcome was going to be because of my knowledge of the balance inside of the game and how the classes balance against each other. But with this, I have literally no idea what it's going to look like, what's going to play like, and is it going to be anything decent when teams like actually try.
Yeah, so you're now talking about your RGL No Restrictions League, which was the reason I brought you on here. Yes. So we kind of pivoted onto that without making the announcement. We kind of just gradually. So why don't you tell us exactly what the RGL No Restrictions League is?
Yeah, so a little bit of a prelude to this, just to explain how this came about, is there was a conversation happening inside the Sixes community every once in a while with the global whitelist, where they come together and they try to decide what weapons should be banned and unbanned inside of the global whitelist. And Sixes historically has had the largest whitelist inside of all the competitive forms.
Yeah, and of course, for people who aren't too familiar with like this, whitelist is the list of weapons that are and aren't allowed in a game. So if you wear a weapon that's not allowed, you just get stock weapon instead. Pretty much. And then the global whitelist is supposedly to go for all leagues running the Sixes format or something like that.
Yes, that is the goal. I think
not
there's
all
some
follow
that
them.
Make, yeah, I think ETF12 might have like a little bit of a pivot difference than them, but either way, it's like pretty much universally standard. And it was a good thing when it first came out, because Sixes went from about 3 years ago, they had close to 50% of weapons banned, whereas now they're only down to a little under 25% or so. Okay. Whereas compared to most leagues, they're under like 10% for the most part.
Yeah.
And so Banny has been over time, like I talked to him, I've had talks with him over time. We've had long balance talks and about game and Sixes and stuff like that. And he always has been like very, very, like everything about Sixes and the bans and restrictions, and Valve needs to come over to theirs. Valve needs to recognize that. I shouldn't say that. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But we just have a lot of talks.
Benny said that Valve needed to come to their side.
No,
what
actually,
do we
I don't
think
remember.
about that?
Honestly,
like, comment, and subscribe if you don't agree with Benny.
I honestly, I should say, I have no idea what our actual original conversations were directly about. It's mostly just like about what is Sixes and what are the goals of Sixes and Valve matchmaking and stuff like that. And what my goals are Prolander and all his, we very long talks about it. And he's a really great guy, very intelligent, good questions, and we would really kind of get at the meat of the bones. And then around January, when the talks came up again, Banny was the most fervent I've ever seen him, where he's like, we should really try to ban all or unban all weapons as much as possible. Like, we should really take this down drastically. Let's, instead of like talking about why these weapons are bad, like let's put them in the game, because it's been a while since anybody's done anything to prove why these weapons need to be unbanned or banned. And so but ultimately, the community, the majority is going to be not on his side, because that's the way majorities work. That's one of the reasons that when we
change, rubble. We want to do it. We know we don't want to account for like short circuit engineer preventing soldier bombs. I don't want to have to deal with that shit. I want to keep bombing, and I want it to keep working.
Right. There's a point where it's like the community will almost always go to the safety part. It takes somebody in the outlier to prove to the group, but you're never going to get the group to agree. And that's why I think it's better to have like an ice frog situation where you have one person who's kind of making the decisions at the end of the day, but who can listen to a group of people to ultimately kind of come down. But ultimately one person has a point of view, and if you can trust them, then it's going to become something better. And so I talked to Benny about it, and he was like, I basically was like, let's do it. Like I'm interested in doing League, but I don't want to do weapons. I want to do everything. I want to do classes. I want to do weapons. I want to be matchmaking in a competitive format so we can finally see, like, what does this look like? Because that's always kind of been a question on my mind, because I even have preconceived notions about why we have class limits inside of Prolander. But I could be completely wrong. And this is why I'm really excited to see the data points that we get from this league, because that's ultimately the goal of this, is not to prove that matchmaking is the best format. It's great, and we all been missing out. The goal of it is to figure out what the hell actually happens when you try at this, when there's money on the line, and what can we communicate to Valve about that so they can make changes to their matchmaking or not. What can we make as a community changes to our competitive formats? Like maybe, Prolander can go to no class limits, for instance, or something like that, because it's going to work better that way. Or honestly, maybe we just this is one of the things I said is maybe we just get rid of Prolander, because, the goals of what Prolander are being accomplished by this this no class restriction matchmaking. There's no need for Prolander anymore, because this does what the goal of Prolander was.
So when I just heard about this, and I was like, what? No restrictions? Nothing? I can do all the crazy stuff I do with my friends in a competitive match? It's like, whoa. I'm really happy to see this, because it starts in March, and I'm going to have to check my schedule, because I'm like a grown-up and I have other responsibilities that take off my time, so I can't play all the time. But I'm really interested in trying to get a team together and try this, because I have so many old strategies and teamwork synergies that is not possible in sixes that we can do now. You can actually run double medic with a vaccinator and do some crazy tech stuff that not a lot of people know about. And there's also a fist of heavy shotgun switcheroo tech thing you can do, which is really strong for absorbing shots. I used it in the show match we did against we played against Banny and some other sixes guys, and I had this trick, because there's an exploit that you can use with the Fist of Steel where you negate the downside by just switching weapons fast. So basically I would just use that, so I would take reduced damage right before getting hit by a rocket or a pipe. So the demo man's account for how many pills they would take would always be +1, so they would always misjudge, and I would always survive most of the engagements. And then we had a demo night called Solar that didn't do much, and I was mad at him.
So Solar, the fervent man, he hasn't made a team yet. I really want to see him make a team so he can finally rest all of the arguments he's always made at Prolander and how awful it is because you can't allow subclass types to exist inside of the format. And so I really look forward to him proving me how useful Demo Night actually is in a real format.
This is where we talk bad about Solar. Solar actually suggested that we try. Well, he was like, dude, what happens if you try and put the Quake rocket launcher in TF2? And I did, and it didn't work no matter how much I tweaked it. It was either garbage or OP. It a rocket launcher without reload doesn't work in TF2 at all.
Yes, I'm very curious to see. I hope he makes a team because I want to so serious about Demo Night to be able to come in there and show us why Demo Night is a useful subclass set, should be accounted for inside of other formats. But I mean, that's one of these things too, where it's once we figure out how allowing multiple classes and stuff, I think ultimately, if I had to guess what it's going to happen, but again, this is completely theory. It's very similar to the way Six is theorized about Prolander. I really don't know what it's going to come out to. My guess is that the best formats are probably going to be basically Scout, Demo, Medic only. I don't think there's going to be any other classes being seen any daylight in any real way, at least in 5CP. I can't imagine why you would ever want to have anything besides a Scout, Demo, and Medic inside of those formats, because they can pretty much take care of any class.
Yeah, pretty much. But then it's the format is so new, and eventually you will learn how to deal with that. So it's similar to what we experienced if you bring it back full circle to the Ambassador and stuff, where in the beginning people weren't good enough to realize it was too good and OP in the right hands. So here we have a new format in sixes, and everyone is just so good, they just don't have the knowledge of what compositions work and what doesn't. What would happen if you just ran 6 demos and you all focused fired one character at the time? Technically, you could win every fight if you coordinated correctly, because nobody could sustain that amount of splash, and you could also stand inside each other's bombs. So like you would sticky your teammates, and if anyone got close, they blown up. So you have like this kind of death ball of just explosions running, and you don't need heal. That's also something like I did think about in the past. Like, what would win of the 12 best demos in the world versus the 12 best engineers in the world, and just those two, like a class war? Like, how would that work? And I think it would be pretty damn close.
Well, there was I don't know if we did a full. I guess there was a class war of Highlander, but it was actually played normal Highlander just with people of the class to see which mains actually were better at the game. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's just a lot of interesting strategies that can come about, and that's one of the reasons that, you know, one of the ways we're structuring it's a league, not a cup, for that very reason, is because somebody might come up with a really broken strategy, but it's kind of like in card games, you know, where it's like somebody will develop a deck which is like seems uncounterable, you know, but it just takes time for someone else to figure out how to tech against.
Absolutely. Like we need to get the DeepMind Alpha team that made AlphaGo, Alpha Star, and Alpha Chess, or whatever it was called, to do that for TF2 just with sixes, no limits, and have a group of machines play TF2 for like 1,000 years and figure out what the best strategy is.
Maybe. I mean, I'm just hoping this one league will be enough to like kind of find, you know, interesting strategies. And the other fun thing too is, again, the one thing I pushed for when me and Banning were talking about this is like I will 100% like not do this league if we don't have no class limits, and I won't do it if we don't have payload and Koth. Like that was like my things. I'm like, I want to see what happens on these map types. You know, what happens to diversity, what happens with the playstyle. Is it, you know, because that's the thing too, is that, you know, that's a long running thing about how six players say that, you know, payload is unplayable with 6 players, and to leave a person dedicated to card is just the worst thing in the world, and yada yada yada. And it's just like, well, Pro Laner plays just fine. It's fast paced. It isn't a big issue that you're playing 6v7 some of the time, because a lot of the times, like, you just are, the point of the cart is to allow the defense to be able to set up. Like, there's a reason why because if you think about it, if the card just moved ×3 on its own, let's say, if you just took a 6v6 fight constantly and you're like constantly on the aggression, like it's always an even fight, but that like usually will benefit the offense because they have faster respawns. So if you have a 5v6 fight because you need to dedicate someone to the cart, that gives the defense the benefit to get set up. But once the cart's in position, that's when you take a 6v6 fight. And then the other thing too is if you have different classes, it doesn't really matter as much. Like if you have one less, if you don't have 6 power classes because of like Pro Laner, for instance, you know, you can't have 7 power classes. Somebody has to be on a class which is like just like okay, you know, when the flex classes, then it's like not a big issue to go 6v7 in like you're missing like an engineer who's pushing on cart. Like it's not the end of the world. It's not, you're not losing that much firepower. Yeah,
and also like you can do a lot with positioning and baiting and stuff like that, and especially when you can run what you're good at, it opens, especially for newer players, I feel like they will be able to do a lot better or feel more comfortable in the sixes format, because boy, I felt a lot of pressure when I started playing. I was like, I can play sniper if I hit my shots. If I don't hit my shots, I have to play scout, or I had to play soldier. And that was it. And I just felt like this immense pressure to just do well, and I couldn't use Girardi, even though I'm like really good with it. Like I can throw it and I can hit air shots with it and stuff like that. And like that's my entire like playstyle. And then I have to use SMG, and I'm like, I don't know how to use this. When do I don't know. And so that's why I'm so excited about this league, because it allows like so many people the opportunity to like do stuff. And I also have people in my on my channel that has very distinct play styles. Like there's this one guy, this scout called Christian Ma. He's one of my favorite guys to follow. He is one of the most obnoxious force of nature scouts you'll ever play against, because he doesn't kill you, but he doesn't die either. He's just like swirling around like it's like trying to punch water. It just like splashes around, and then you get wet, and he's still wet, and he's still there, and so it allows for like cool plays like that. People who have like mastered a special trait that no one can account for.
Right, and, and that's the thing. That's kind of like Dota, right? Where it's like there's people who are like they're known because they know how to use this certain hero really, really, really well, and they have this like they have the your hero pools, but it's like the best mid players in the world. Like they probably play the meta ones, but they all have their own unique play style with it. But then also, they also can like how deep into the reservoir do you go? It's kind of like back when the soda popper got banned everywhere because of Ibby. Before Ibby, nobody really gave two shits about it, but then suddenly, It's like, oh my god, this thing is so broken. Holy crap, this is so incredibly broken. Or like the rescue, the Sigafoo save, the rescue ranger was out for 9 months, prior to me creating it. No one put it together in any meaningful way, at least in competitive, that is. When it came up with it. And
I mean,
also,
I remember
like,
before seeing it, I would use like similar, but I wouldn't use it to that extreme degree because I wasn't aware that you could soak up that much damage with it. Like people was just using it as a bullet sponge, but not to that extreme.
Right.
So
and so, yeah, it's just like one of those crazy things where it's like that will hopefully be one of the things that we see is people who have, and that's one thing is I'm looking forward to. It's one team called Cat Noises. It's run by this guy named Daff, and he's been a big supporter of Prolander. He really loves playing Prolander. His team actually just won first place last season over Banny and the Cowardly Dogs. And I was talking with him. He's like, oh, he's got like so many strats. He's like, I've been like planning on like we're gonna use like Mad Milk in this way, and we're gonna use Critical in this way. And like,
speaking of Critical, I just saw a chat: 4 Critical scouts, 2 medics. There you go. That's your meta. And then like, okay, 1 sentry.
I mean, why not just like 6 scouts? 3 Mad, like, and then you all just run Mad Milk to each other up during fights. I don't know. We're gonna find out. But that's the thing too, is that ultimately like Valve, rightfully so, does not make changes often on theory crafting. Like they want to see data, they want to see it being broken, and like the community hasn't really done that. They're just like, oh, this is bad, and it's like maybe because like, and it's kind of like to the point of like you're making before, where it's like maybe you had like one bad experience with, but a league was never allowed to develop a counter to it, or people just like don't like it, and so like it just doesn't work. And so that's the thing I'm looking forward to most, is seeing like how many of these weapons that are banned, and particularly in 6s, are actually broken, and how many of them are actually like totally fine once you figure out like how to play around them, or there's different ways to be able to play around it, and it makes it not such a big deal. Kind of in the same way, again, like everybody theorized about Prolander being wrong. It's like theory crafting doesn't really mean shit. Like ultimately, you just gotta do it and see what happens, and then we'll be able to be like, okay, Valve, like this weapon's really broken, and let me show you why. That's I think one of the reasons that the Razorback and the DDS got changed was after the Challenge Cup. Those were banned in every single game, and Valve reached out to me after I ran the Challenge Cup, and they're like, hey, can you send us the data from the cup and talk about what you learned and your experiences from that? And I was like, here's the pick ban data, because we did pick ban for weapons. We didn't have a standard whitelist, and then ended up that those 2 weapons got hit with the Nerf hammer, rightfully so. And it's like they're totally willing to make balance changes for competitive, and that's the thing that people are like, oh, Valve doesn't listen because they don't put in restrictive 6 exactly how we want it inside of matchmaking, and therefore they never listen. There's all these weapons that aren't actually issues, but they are issues in our niche format, and therefore they are terrible, and Valve does not listen. But it's like, no, they do listen, if it makes sense, and if you can show them why it doesn't make sense. But if it's like this thing's bad in 6s, like who cares? Like it's just a niche.
Yeah, I did talk to, when I was at Valve too, I did talk about balance, and they were very much interested in just listening to what I had to say rather than them telling me like how it is. And at that point, that was the time when the reserve shooter for the Pyro still critted while you air blasted them. And they asked me like what I thought was the most OP weapon in the game, and people had other weapons, but I just like not just out of like just how powerful it was, but just how many checkpoints it hooked off in terms of how it was good, because it did a lot of damage, and it also worked as a secondary air blast in the air that also resulted in crater damage. So it was like CC plus more CC plus a lot of damage plus you're dead plus really low effort to do it, and it's faster than the shotgun, so it's faster, more damage, CC, pushback, knockback, kill, death summary. So what I like to do, like I spend usually a week analyzing all weapons when I do the episode, and I have user submitted, so I watch a lot of like from high play to low tier play of how different people use their unlocks, and sometimes I learn a lot of how a weapon works, and usually you can summarize weapons of how they work, and you can kind of do stuff like the classic is like always less damage or the same, so it's not that good for a sniper, and it also works totally different because you have to hold on the button and stuff. So that's why I'm finally now able to do the balance mod, which I've been doing for I don't know when I did it, but someone was like, hey, I made this plugin, it's super easy to use. And then I was like, cool, I don't know how to code, I'll do this. And then I did that. So we have over, I think it's 78 weapons that we've altered, and we've altered the engineer class to make teleporters cheaper, so people that don't have the Eureka effect are suffering upgrade times for those who just happen to have it and just place down the entrance at spawn and run out.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I mean, we can kind of pivot just real quick about the matchmaking stuff. So if you guys are interested, it's mm.rgl.gg, or you can just go to rgl.gg and get information about all our leagues. It's starting up on March 5th. Registration closed on March 2nd. It's free to play. One of the other things just real quick about that is that we have a prize pool for the top division, but every single team,
prizes? That's the best.
Can get keys and badges.
That's a lot of hats if you change it into refined.
And it's the idea is that we really want to get teams to experiment, and we really want them to give us feedback. And so basically, if you play in the league and you don't forfeit any games, and you experiment in your play style and you give us feedback at the end of the season, you get a key. It's literally that easy. Just by playing and giving us feedback and experimenting with the game, you get a key.
Yeah.
It really can't be much more simple. And I think that's something that's never been done in any league before, where every team has
certainly going to work great for motivation as well, because there's something that is always called like the dominant strategy in games. Like, what is the one thing that usually works? And I think in your league we'll be seeing, like, I have really no idea, so I can just like throw something out there. I think we will see like one strategy that is better than the others, but might not be the best one overall. It just works in that league because people are not prepared for it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But I mean, and so I'm excited about that. But yeah, so you showed me before we got started in this, you brought me to the balance mod server, which I've never played, and I've seen all your posts about it and stuff like that. I've been very curious. And when I initially saw the engineer changes that you made with this jump pad and the speed pad, well, I don't know. Do you want to like talk about them a little bit before I kind of give my feelings on it?
Yes, so the speed, it wasn't the speed pads, but the jump pads was something that I had in mind for a long time. I'll just show you my train of thought with like designing this unlock. Like, someone else made this, so people can design the same things at different times. People who are Russian and have more time and can code and are not as bad as me. But basically, it was like, okay, so there's certain situations where engineer teleporters are basically spy spotters. Like when you're on last, nobody needs to teleport anywhere. Teleport, like, that's what I use them for. I'm not sure if you do that. If you use them as a, like, on Badwater last on a pub, you're like, put the teleporter in the stair, and if it gets destroyed, I know that someone's there. Basically like a spotter. So I thought, like, what is the teleporter's function? Well, it is moving people from point A to point B instantly. Well, how about we have something that can help them move vertically and horizontally? And it's actually active right now. I don't think you can build in spawn, but we're on the server, so... And there's also been some videos. So it works pretty close to what I wanted. I tried to tweak it a bit. Of course, we have no idea if this is balanced or not, so we will do a public playtest on this on Saturday. And so you got the chance to try both the speed pad and the jump pad. And the jump pads have two configurations. If you hold crouch while you're on it, you get a different trajectory. So that means if you walk crouch on it, nothing is really going to happen. But if you jump and then crouch and land on it, you're going to bounce forward as every class. So what was your thoughts on the NG pads, as they're called?
When I first saw them, I kind of was like, what's the point? Like, to be totally honest, like, I saw you had like a little video where you're like, oh, you know, you can like use it to like snipe somebody from the intro, you know, whatever. I'm like, okay, like, that's kind of like interesting, but like doesn't seem like very practical or any useful way. And then like I got on there and I was like, oh yeah, like, you know, particularly, I mean, that actually isn't the worst idea of like, okay, on the first point of Badwater, I now can get an angle on the medic where I couldn't before, you know, without having to expose myself pushing up cliffside. But more importantly, it was like, oh, there's all these different circumstances where engineer never uses teleporter. Yeah. You know, particularly like on payload a lot. Even Koth teleporters are very useful, but on payload, it's like, okay, like second point of upward, you know, teleporter, you're not going to use this teleporter on second point of upward. Like you might, like I'll do one from spawn to like the double window, but it'd be so much more useful to have a jump pad to be able to just jump into the second window so you can be able to get into that ground very quickly. or like on Upward Last, again, where it's like, taking control of tiles is really critical,
Yeah.
and to have to walk all the way around is a big deal. So as an engineer, I can now just build a jump pad so my team can just get launched up into there, or the conch jump, or what do you want to call it, the one that pushes you forward rather than up. That's could be used in any map, particularly on Koth, where you could use it to launch a heavy all the way into the enemy team to start an initiation, especially if you get them like Ubered right away or something, and then your team can follow up that he gets behind them or whatever, and it can cause a lot of disruptions. I don't know if that's broken or not, because I feel like it could be broken.
But there's the thing though. There's so like in theory you see like all these awesome things, and then you realize that these things take a while to build. They take a while to charge, and the unintentional team sabotage that can happen is also there. Like it's also present, and spies can take these too, right? So imagine the crouch jump, it's bouncy trick stabs you can get as a spy. Like suddenly it's a big threat. It's not just to your team, and also the speed pads speeds up the spy when he's disguised, meaning he can, like, if you thought the big earner was fast, now he runs slightly faster than a scout for 5 seconds, I think. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that regard, because it opens so much up for spies, and during that time you also will not have a teleporter. But like, I've just tested this a little bit, and like, this is interesting, but when it comes to balance, one of the hardest things to balance in any game is movement, like balancing the movement, because movement can outshine anything. Like if your positioning and movement is good, it doesn't matter if I one-shot you if I never hit you, right? Because you move so well, or you're so hard to hit. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how actually people play with them, because bots, they use them as teleporters and don't know what they're doing. But that's cool.
I think it's fantastic. Like, it's literally like, that's always been the challenge. The dev team has even admitted, like, balancing engineering, creating new stuff is like really, really hard. But like, this makes a ton of sense, because teleporters are like, dispensers are always useful, sentry guns are always useful, but like teleporters, it's not uncommon for them to be completely worthless or unable to be set up realistically.
And also, I imagine this, like, let's say you're running defense, and then you have, let's say, 3 engineers on a pub, right? So usually, like, this is with pub in mind, but I'm with the belief that if you create like a rule set that is like structurally balanced on like a theoretical level or philosophical level, it will work in any mode, like regardless. Like it could work with 12 or work with 6 if it's like really, really solid. So you could have like one engineer, let's say you just have 2 for this example, like one builds a teleporter, the other has speed pads or jump pads in the front, which makes it like, okay, so you have one teleporter. If a spy gets the one teleporter, the logistics really hurt, because then you have speed pads in the front that people in the spawn can't use and stuff like that.
Right.
So it opens so many new possibilities, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all the crazy stuff people would do with it, even things that I didn't even think about. Like, what happens if you perfectly place 2 of the jump pads so that you can like conch jump 2 in a row, and you use that as like an escape tool instead of just running? That's something you can do. Like, some engineers, they like to have like an escape teleporter. Then you need 2. Now you only need 1. You can put up a speed pad and you can just run away.
Right.
So yeah.
Cool. A lot of I'm like, I mentioned this to you, but I gotta email Valve soon, and I'm like, I'm definitely gonna include this, because I think it's so utterly fascinating and a realistic. I think it's a very realistic one, where it's like, it fits, because that's one thing that me and you have talked about before, which is that does it fit the integrity of the class? Yeah.
So So I've been very, very careful with doing this, and I've gotten back to my original designs, and I tried to figure out, like, just doing the math, like, how do I balance the height, the speed, the distance, like, in terms to the teleporter, because that's how I have to balance it. Like, let's say you were making the direct hit compared to the rocket launcher. It's like, oh yeah, faster rocket, more damage, less explosion, cool. But this is like movement, and that is so hard, because it's really up to the players' imaginations how they use this. So I'm looking forward to seeing how people are using that real soon.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to so you got that to look forward to, and I got we're only a few weeks away from being able to see what the heck happens instead of matchmaking 6s. So a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I also emailed Valve that I had this balance mod that I've been working on, and I've modded 72 weapons, and they were like, yeah, thumbs up, good job, with a spelling error in it. And it was Eric that answered me. So that was
Eric
cool.
is very responsive. Yes.
Yeah. So before we finish off here, I just wanted to run a couple of balance things through you before
Sure.
that. So you're an engineer, so I wanted to talk to an engineer about this. So the Eureka effect, I see if you want to play like super effective min-maxing, like getting the most out of your engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Is there at any point in time where you don't quickly switch to the Eureka effect to build a teleporter entrance and then switch back to just reduce your cost by half?
I guess there wouldn't. I don't do that because I don't care enough.
Okay.
But because generally speaking, it's not as much of an issue because that for at least at spawn, right? Usually by the time wherever you're going to run to go to, there's almost always an ammo pack right there. Yeah. So the time lost by putting down to get 25, save 25, and then to go back to spawn to respawn, you're probably losing 2 to 3 seconds there when literally you can probably just deviate your path very slightly to grab an ammo pack. So it's usually not enough of an issue, I think. But there's no reason that teleports shouldn't just be 25 because it's not like it doesn't matter. Yeah,
so that's what I did here. So what I did with the Eureka effect is that I made it so that all teleporters cost 25 across all wrenches. However, the Eureka effect's passive build rate of teleporters are faster than the passive build rate of non-Eureka wrench. However, it's not faster than if you actively hit it with your wrench. So if you use the Eureka effect and I use the regular wrench, if we build it at the same time, mine will finish before yours. Sadly, the attribute isn't really used, so there's a side effect where it also affects dispensers. So dispensers will build faster by themselves, left unsupervised with the Eureka effect on this server, which I think was fine. It's not that much, like 25% or something like that. But if you're actively upgrading it, it's a lot slower. Like, you feel the penalty. Also buff the Thompson. Does a ton of damage now. Should be somewhat good. I've removed all the bullshit, so it doesn't remove Uber or Cloak.
Yeah. I was going to say, is like Thompson, I think giving, engineer a mid-range, long-range kind of nuisance gun is like interesting. But yeah, the whole, removing Uber and Spy just is like so dumb. Like, I think the medic one is not the worst in the world, but the Spy one is really bad. You should, because like Spy is a counter to engineer. Engineer should not have a tool that directly counters its counter. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, like, there's a couple of things you shouldn't touch, and that's the Spy Cloak, and that's the Medic Uber. Those should be for that classes, and the other should just stay out.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that I agree.
Absolutely. So, with that out of the way, I have talked about everything, and of course I promoted your RGL No Restrictions League, which I'm looking super forward to. This is like the first time I'm really stoked about anything competitive in TF2 for quite some time. So that says something where my priorities are.
No, I think I'm very, very excited for what we're gonna do, and that's a lot of people. I mean, there is the entrenched community of sixes is like very against this. Or I shouldn't say very against it, but they don't get it. But like the majority of interactions that I've had with people from any other community is like very just like, I just want to see what happens. Like, they're hyped, but it's like, it's one of these things where like, are they hyped? They're hyped because they just want to know. Yeah. And that's how I am. I'm like, I literally don't know. So I'm really curious to see what our viewership numbers are going to be like. For it, but I'm really looking forward to it. And so you can go to you can go to RGL.GG to get links for it. If you go to RGL in the top right corner, you can get a link to our YouTube channel where VODs will go, and then you can get a link to our Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/RGL GG, and you can watch it live. It'll be on Tuesday nights most likely for us Americans, but if you're European like yourself, you can catch the VOD and you'll have a good time checking that out.
So that is Romeo Golf Lima .golf RGL.GG. Cool.
Yes.
Anything else you want to do before we close out? It's always been a pleasure having you here because while we don't agree on absolutely everything, I think our mindset is similar. Like, we want to include everybody and allow everything. So you could play TF2 the way you're used to. But just I would say like the focus shouldn't be on the items and what you can and can't do. It would be more like work with your team and pay attention to what they're doing. Because some of the best memories I have from TF2 is playing on community servers where comp players used to play. So there would be like 90% of them would be really good in a pub. So it was almost like having 2 sixes teams on each team, and the matches were just amazing, and it was just neck and neck, and it was just fantastic. And I've never experienced that after quick play came in and like the stomp and the champions appeared. Like, you know, I think when you play, I don't think there's a single game where you're not in the top 3, like ever.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that's the thing is like, that's the thing with community servers dying, is it really lost out on that. Like I used to go to Skyle Badwater when I wanted to casually play, because you knew you would always get top level players inside of there for Highlander, and you'd have a lot of fun going up against them, and it felt like a challenge, whereas now I just feel bad. Most games I go into, I just feel bad playing, because I'm just like, I'm stomping these kids, and I'm like, this is not challenging to me. And I can't also switch teams to go to the losing team to make myself like, oh, well, at least I'll help the losing team do better.
I mean, that's how I got, like, I was practicing sniper for like 8 hours when I was like early student days, and I was probably in the top 5 in the world, if not top 1. I like to think top 1, because there was a period where no one could beat me, because I was just, I mean, it was all I did. Sniper, that's it. So what I would do, I would play against stackers, you know, people with their friends, and I would go on the losing team every time, and I will always play sniper, and that made me so good at like picking and then dying myself. So, but that's something that's gone. Like, you know, the rivalries. I used to have rivals, people I would never be on the same team with. Like, I hate that guy, I want to kill him instead. And that's just gone. But hopefully we can get that back. I think in comp you have rivals, like you play against teams. Like, oh, I know. That spy, he's always so good. Oh, I'm gonna prepare this time.
I used to have that with my community server, where it was the inverse, where it was like people always wanted to be on my, because I was known to being a very good spy, and so they wanted to not play against me, so they wouldn't have to deal with my wrath. You know, so I was a spy main before I was an engineer main.
Oh, right. I was a medic main before I was a sniper main. Which
the choices we make.
Yeah, helped a lot with the television though. Cool. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, and as a surprise, I will be playing on this new server. It's going to be the podcast stream playtest of these NG pads on the US server. I'm not sure if you have time.
I could probably play a little bit. Oh, I can't build and spawn here.
No, you can't build and spawn. All right, so we're going to end the podcast here, and this is going to be exclusive for only you podcast viewers. This is not going to be available on YouTube for anyone else, so stay tuned. We're going to open up the server, and then you can join us. Password is going to be removed pretty soon, and if you're watching this on YouTube, there's going to be a playtest in the EU on Saturday, and then you can join there and play with this fun. And okay, so time to go. You're a ghost. See ya. You want to give them the last shout-outs?
Just shout out to everybody who helps out with RGL and everybody who supports us from our community.
Yeah, much love to everybody. See ya.